So, JT, welcome to the Novel Idea Society, which is a book club partnership between CBC Saskatchewan and the Regina Public Library. We're going to talk about your book. It's One of Us, and I have to clarify which book we're going to talk about because you have two books out in 1 year, which is a lot of work. How did that happen? And quickly tell us about promoting two books at the same time in 1 year.
I had a book in my Taylor Jackson series come out on Tuesday. It's called The Wolves Come at Night. And it is a little close to the release of It's One of Us, but it was really the only time to do it. And I really wanted it to be out before Thriller Fest that I'm in New York to celebrate. So it's fun to have two books, one a standalone, one in a long running series. And it kind of taps into, both readers because a lot of the series readers don't read the standalones, and a lot of the standalone folks don't know about the series because it's not been out for so long. So I'm just kind of tapping into both markets. I had a lot of downtime. I don't know, there was this crazy moment like the pandemic, I think they called it, and I didn't have a lot to do. So I wrote a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay. I dug into your whole backstory, which I think is fascinating. The backstory of this book is fascinating. I want to talk about those things. I want to talk about character development. We're going to get into spoilers in this, which we always do during book club. Yeah. I have people in this room who read the last page first. So those are always my favorite ones to talk to, because in thrillers that literally always ruins the book. But before we start, for the room who is not at Thriller Fest, what is Thriller Fest?
Thriller Fest is summer camp for writers. It is I think this is my first Thriller Fest was my debut year in 2007. I actually got a deal. Actually, it was 2006. Excuse me. I got my deal 3 weeks before the very first Thriller Fest, and I was able to go to the event, and my badge said author on it, and it was the most remarkable moment. And it was in Scottsdale, and it was 120 degrees, and the hotel had all these crazy groups there. There were Boy Scouts, there were cheerleaders, there were nuns, and there were thriller writers. So it was really an interesting way to start my career. So I try to go every year. They've now moved to New York. There's programming, there's Craft Fest. I taught a class on building an author platform today with Sarah DeVello at Craft Fest. There's Pitch Fest, where new writers can come and pitch agents. There's the actual conference itself, Thriller Fest, where, they've got big stars of the field interviewing other big stars of the field, and there's panels, and it's really a lot of fun.
There we go. Okay, so you started writing as an author. I use quotation marks. You got the official author name badge,
right,
at that Thriller Fest. But you had a very interesting previous career before you started writing books. Tell us about that.
You mean the political stuff?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I lived in DC and went to high school in DC, and my mom volunteered at the White House. And she obviously, was my way in. It was a very cool thing. So I did a couple of internships. I worked in presidential personnel one summer. I worked in cabinet affairs one full semester, and they actually asked me to stay. They offered me a full-time job, and like an idiot, I went back to school, which was so dumb. It would have been really cool to stick around and actually, go back to school later. And then when I did graduate, I started in the Office of Science and Technology Policy, where we did white papers on, the most current science, and I did advanced work for the secretary. And then I moved to the Department of Commerce and worked for the secretary there as a personal assistant, speech writing. It was everything from speech writing to running out to get new pantyhose, right? It was, I was a kid. I was a dog's body. I did whatever they told me to do. And it was a lot of fun. It was a very, very heady experience to be a kid in DC, getting to rub elbows with the people that were leading the country. It was pretty cool.
Which administration were you working for, just out of curiosity, to date yourself a little?
To date myself, it was the first Bush administration.
Okay, very cool. Just an interesting history. So
Yeah,
you go from working in politics, going to university, and you end up in Nashville.
right.
How did you end up going from political life to writing thrillers? Because you're not writing political thrillers.
No. I mean, my Samantha Owens series does take place in DC, and there's some political stuff, but that's not my fort. Other people do it really, really well. So I've kind of stayed away from it. But I met my husband the first night of graduate school at George Washington University, where we were studying political management so we could learn how to run political campaigns. And we got married 3 years later to the day, and he's from Nashville, and we moved to Nashville. And we'd been married for like 2 years, I think. And he wanted to move home. And I thought Tennessee was a football team. I didn't quite really understand what I was getting myself into. But we moved there, and I turned into a bad country music song. Our cat died. I had no friends. He was going off to work. I kept getting lost. There's one road that's in 4 different places in Nashville. I mean, it was just a really confusing time. And then I finally did get a job working for a vet. And I was 3 days into that going, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. It was a very different environment from what I had come from. And I picked up a dog and blew out a disc in my back and had to have back surgery. And while I was recovering, I went to the library, I went to my local library, and I asked them if they had any, new books for me, some crime fiction. I really liked thrillers. And they gave me John Sanford. And that I was 3 books into the Praise series, and it just clicked for me. And I was like, this is what I need to do. It had been 8 years since I had written I was a double major in college in politics and creative writing. And my creative writing professor told me I wasn't good enough to get published. So I had quit writing and went the politics route. And that it was just this moment of, oh my gosh, I've got to try this. And I wrote that first paragraph, and I hit the period, and I burst into tears because I was finally home. And it happened really fast for me. It feels like it was fast. It was a few years of, starts and stops and writing a book, thinking it was a novel, all of the mistakes that newbie writers make. But yeah, I got that first deal in 2006, and I have not looked back. Making up for lost time.
Have you had a chance to tell John the impact? Have you met him?
Yes, I have.
What was that meeting like?
It was really, I think he hears that from a lot of people. What's funny is I actually sent a query to his editor back before I understood that, you needed an agent, and the agent got in touch with the editor and all of that. And we're now actually really good friends. He's here at the conference, and I talked to him for about a half an hour this afternoon. It's really a very full circle moment to, be teaching at a conference where my heroes walk the halls. It's really cool.
Have you sent any of your books to that professor that told you couldn't write?
I have not. She didn't get tenure, so I figured that got taken care of.
Okay, let's talk about It's One of Us. And let's start with your story at the end and how this one was personal for you. Because I think that it's interesting that you didn't put that at the front of the book, but at the end, and it made me think differently about the book. So maybe tell a little bit of the story behind the decision to include that information.
Sure. I mean, it was a difficult decision. I mean, this is a story that is very much based in my husband and I's struggle with infertility. We tried for years, and I could get pregnant with very little problem. I just couldn't stay pregnant. And the doctors couldn't figure out why. And I had a number of miscarriages over the years. And, it was incredibly difficult for both of us. There were, of course, though, as in every tragedy, moments of humor. And it was one of those moments, the Sweet Home Alabama story, that my husband said, you've got to find a way to put this in a book. And there, how am I going to write about it though? Because infertility is not a topic that you do in a thriller, right? They don't, very incongruous. It's a women's fiction story, but I am a thriller writer. So I had to figure out how to do that. And it took a long time to even be able to process sitting down to write a story and being that raw. So it took me, 10 years almost of building a buffer, building up a callus on my heart about this story before I could even try to write it. And it wasn't until Olivia appeared to me. I was sitting there one day and I had an image in my mind of this woman walking down a beach alone with her arms around her, and she was incredibly sad. And I needed to know why. And it's one of the things we do with our characters. We ask them why and who and what makes them who they are. And when I started interrogating her, she told me she had had a miscarriage that day. And I went, oh my God, this is her story. I had tried for years to tell the story from Park's point of view, and it just wouldn't work. There was nothing about it that would work for me. But when I changed it to be Olivia's point of view and it was her story, then everything came together and I was able to write Park's point of view and then all the others. So.
Have you thought about the title as like a double entendre about fertility? And also, was that intentional?
It was intentional. This book had a number of names and we never were quite comfortable with what we had landed on. And we finally got on a call. It was me and my agent and my editor, my publisher, and we got on a Zoom. And I like to leave, the end of a chapter. I want you to want to turn the page to find out what happens next. And so I was going to the ends of every chapter and just reading out loud what it said. And I hit, "It's one of us." And my publisher said, "Stop, say it again." I said, "It's one of us." And they're like, "That's it." And the cover, the cover really makes the book, right? It's so thematically perfect for this. And the artist, Sean Capitan, he says that this is his unicorn. This is the book that, that they have one unicorn a year where they hit it out of the park with the art and they all know it. And there's no adjustments. They don't change anything. And that was this cover. It's just perfect. But yes, it is a very metaphorical title.
So the way the story flows, I like that you label from whose perspective at the start of every chapter, who you're kind of talking to, because it lets you dive a little deeper into that character's thought process. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about character development and the arc of those characters, because it gets really complicated. And then you throw twins that have both P names. Like, I could see how this was not a confusing read, but it could have been a confusing read for people. So I'm curious how you worked through developing the way the story flowed and developing characters at the same time.
So Perry and Park are the two P's that you're talking about. They are twins. I grew up in a little community in Colorado called Perry Park and had always threatened when I had my twin boys, because I wanted two sets of twins when I was growing up. It was just this weird thing that I wanted. And I was going to name the boys Perry and Park. So I had to, right? If I was going to cut open my veins and bleed on the page like this, I decided to pull some of my really, my own feelings about that in there. So Perry and Park are brothers. They were really fun to write. Perry especially. So, Park is Olivia's husband. He thinks doing everything right to support her. And of course he's doing everything wrong. Unlike my husband, who did everything right. But anytime I have a character who is like Park that people are going to love to hate sometimes, I take my husband and I twist it and do the exact opposite. And that's who Park is, right? The opposite of my husband. But Perry has left town. He's a wildlife photographer for the BBC. And I just thought that was the coolest job for somebody to have. And that's what I do with these characters. So Park is a ghostwriter. Perry is a photographer. Olivia is a designer. I'm mad for design shows. It's like my Saturday and Sunday morning ritual. We get up, we have breakfast, we get our tea, and then we watch design shows. I love seeing people take something and creating something new out of it. And then you have all the other characters, right? And so everyone became their own person. And when one character got hard to write, Olivia usually was the one that was getting really heavy for me to write, I could switch into somebody else entirely and tell their story. And I'm not an outliner, I'm a gardener. I like to, spread a bunch of seeds and we see what comes up, and then I start working with what grows, which is the opposite of Olivia, who's an architect.
Right.
Who's holding on very tightly to every single little thing. So
I was going to ask you if you are a plotter or a fly by the seat of your pants, but you came up with a totally new analogy I've never heard before.
yes, gardeners or architects. Yes, that's George R.R. Martin's explanation. And so I go with that because I think it's so elegant. You can do the Beethoven Mozartian one as well, but that starts getting a little, a little too esoteric. But
when you say you spread seeds, you have ideas then. So you're not entirely flying by the seat of your pants.
No, I call it 40 scenes. So when I have 40 scenes, which it could be something as simple as Olivia walking down the beach, Olivia in park having breakfast, Perry coming home, Scarlett running down the stairs. I mean, it doesn't have to be big. It's just something. I'm very visual. So when I see something visually in my head, I write that down as a scene. And when I have 40 of those, if you do writer math, if a scene is 2,000 words, you have 40 scenes, that's 80,000 words of your manuscript right there. So I write 40 scenes and then I never look at it again. I go off and do my thing. And I'll go back to it if I get really stuck. But yeah, I have a tendency
to 80,000 words and then never look at them again.
No, I write 40 scenes. I write 40 ideas of scenes.
Oh, okay.
Let's put it that way. There are 40 ideas of scenes that, if fleshed out to 2,000 words each, would make 80,000 words.
Do you just put them in a jar and pull one out if you're stuck?
Well, I use Scrivener, so yeah, it's a folder, but I should call it the idea jar. That's kind of fun.
So let's talk about Peyton, because Peyton there was a point where I knew when I read thrillers, and I don't know if everyone does this, but there was a point where I used to pick the page where I was like, I think I figured out who it is. Mm-hmm. And I did think it was Peyton, and maybe that was intentional because obviously you have unreliable people, but when he said he was going away, and it was all it seemed very strange and out of nowhere that he was going away. And I was like, oh, it's probably him. But then to come to the ending you get to, did you always know that Olivia was going to be the bad guy, or did that come through edits?
That came through just the writing process. I knew somebody was sending flowers and I thought it was Park. And when it came to that scene, I realized what an opportunity I had to turn the whole story on its ear and have Olivia be the one that has been sending flowers to the dead girl's family this whole time. And it broke open for me. So, being a gardener, I don't necessarily know the ending, and that's a good thing. When I know the ending of a book, I have a really hard time not telegraphing it. And you mentioned Peyton and that you knew who it was. I wasn't trying to obscure who it was, or else I wouldn't have even brought him into the story, right? The difference between a thriller and a mystery. The thriller, the reader knows more than the characters. Right. The mystery, the reader is finding out the clues as the characters find out the clues. So right. This is a thriller. I'm not trying to obscure who the killer is. The right. twist is Olivia's involvement in all of this. That was the twist. But I like Peyton being on the page so that people can look at his mother and say, wow. What would you do in this situation? I mean, Darby has found herself in a really awkward situation. And now we get into the nature versus nurture debate. I mean, there are millions and millions of kids born to sperm donation, and they don't turn out to be killers. I mean, it's a fluke of nature, right? And she's done everything right with this kid, and there's just something deeply wrong with him. And then you've got the whole free will aspect of he does choose to indulge the darkness where a lot of people don't, right? So it kind of takes the sperm donation aspect out of it. He's just somebody who's choosing the darkness instead of choosing the light. And that is, he's an interesting character. He was one of the more interesting killers that I've written.
What research did you do into the whole sperm donation, children of sperm donors thing? Because I found, and I mean, I guess maybe the point was to find it weird, but the instant desire to call someone dad that you've never met before. And I mean, their characters were flawed. We'll call them flawed. But I'm wondering, because I'm not in that situation,
Right.
I'm wondering if people who were born in that situation would also have that that feels kind of to me moment. And if you had those conversations or if you just wrote into it.
No, I did a ton of research, and I've actually heard from people who have been in this situation and they've felt like, wow, they're seen for the first time in a novel. Especially the mothers who are, they've got ticking time bombs possibly, and they don't know it. And they just, so there was a really great podcast and book, Donor 9623, I believe that's the correct number, that went into this. He was schizophrenic and lied on everything, and they found out, and instead of pulling the samples, they let him continue giving samples, and he has 100 kids. And they all obviously now have a genetic predisposition to schizophrenia. That combined with, there was a book by Robert Kolker called Hidden Valley Road that goes into the Galvin family, who have 12 children. 6 of the boys have schizophrenia. So it was a really interesting backdrop. Now, Peyton does not have schizophrenia. He has more borderline personality disorder than anything else. But yeah, I did a bunch of research with that. And then I've also got an ancestry account, and we've had people reach out to us, saying, hey, we're trying to figure out where we are in the family tree. I was adopted. You've turned up as a 4th cousin, that kind of stuff. So it does, it does happen. And Scarlett, though, she is, I think, trying to tick off her mother too a little bit by, it's a betrayal. It's such a betrayal for her to be calling him dad when, that is exactly the opposite of what Darby wanted for their life together.
Did you realize when you were writing this how much light you were shedding on these things that are just not talked about infertility, about sperm donors, about the positions that mothers, that whether they can have babies on their own or whether they're choosing to just not have a partner and just have kids, to open up that conversation? Because I feel like this is really vulnerable for you to even talk about your own personal story like this.
Right. No, you're not wrong. It's, it's a very interesting thing, because coastal conversation about how you make a family is very different than anything in the flyover states, right? In the flyover states, we don't talk about this. It's just not something we talk about. In California, in New York, it's so commonplace that it's weird not to talk about it. So there's a whole subsection of the country that just doesn't have these conversations. And yes, I wanted to have conversations about hard things. I mean, that's what books are for. We are meant to open doors and start conversations and make people uncomfortable in many ways. And I'm not usually, though, the person that likes to do that. I'm a very private person. I had a really hard time wrapping my head around that I was going to have to tour this book, that I was going to have to go out and talk about my experiences and what my husband and I went through and how I distilled it into a story. And I did not want to turn the book in. I really didn't want to turn the book in because I knew I was going to have to come out and talk about it. But it has been one of the most healing. I could have gone to therapy for a million years and not been as healed as I have been talking with people and getting notes from women who have gone through this, whether they've used sperm donation, whether they've adopted, whether they've just never managed to have children at all. It has been remarkable, the outpouring of love from people who are like, wow, I feel seen for the first time. And that's, that is why I did it.
But it also had to
it
make
was for
you
them.
feel seen too.
Very much so. A little too much, actually.
What did your husband think of the book? I'm assuming that he read it knowing that it was such a personal story.
He did read it. I mean, it was something that we talked about at length because it's like, listen, this is your story too. And that's something I think that gets glossed over. I mean, it's not just the woman's story, it's the partner's story as well. And that is really important to remember. And I felt like I had to get his permission, because it was going to be really personal stuff out there in the world that we don't normally do. I mean, we didn't tell our friends we told so few people. It was we were 3 or 4 years into it before we even told anyone that I had had miscarriages. I mean, it just was something, again, I don't want to use the word stigma, but there is this stigma to it when you can't succeed in having a natural family, and that needs to change.
I think books like this certainly open up the conversation. That's for sure.
I hope so.
Going back to when you started writing, you said it took a couple years to get things kind of flowing with your first book deal. How did it come together for you? Did you have the book finished? Did you have an agent first? How did your first book flow into the rest of this career that you built for yourself?
Okay. I actually, there's a site called Publishers Marketplace that you can check mark a box that says this author is looking for an agent. So I had finished the first book and I had a critique group. So I was working with people. I had some beta readers who read it and thought it was worth, trying to get published. And so I started doing the research into finding an agent, and I joined Sisters in Crime, and they've got a group called the Guppies. So I was getting feedback from the Guppies, and learning how to go about getting the work out to trying to find an agent and going on submission. And while I was doing all the research into who I wanted, again, I had check marked that little box. Well, somebody saw it from Trident Media and sent me a note and said, hey, we'd be interested in looking at your book. And I thought it was a joke, right? I thought it was one of my friends playing a joke on me because the agent at the time, Scott Miller, he was the it boy of crime fiction is what he was called.
Oh, wow.
Right. I mean, he was Harvard, right? He was my Harvard. And here he was requesting my manuscript, which I totally thought was a joke. And it wasn't. It was really him. His assistant, actually, Holly Root, who now has her own huge agency, was from Tennessee, and the Tennessee caught her eye. She read it. She gave it to him. He read it. He called me, offered representation, and took the book out. We did some edits on it. He made me change one rather large problem, which was the main character died at the end. He was like, nope, this is a franchise character. You can't kill her off. And the book didn't sell. It went out to the big 7 at the time, publishers. They all said no. They all said no for the same reason, interestingly. And I was devastated because I was thrown back immediately to the conversation with my thesis advisor who said I wasn't good enough to get published. But
why did they say no?
It was part of the motivation of the killer was organic. There was an organic problem that was causing him to be, he wasn't evil enough.
Could you just make him more evil?
Because he technically wasn't culpable. Yeah, it wasn't bad enough. It wasn't dark enough with that. So they had me write another book, and that was all the pretty girls. And that sold literally the night we sent it out. We got a call from Linda McFall that said, do not sell this to anybody else. I need to take it to Ed Board, and that sold in a 3-book deal. And, it all just kind of happened from there. And so that book, that first book is now called Field of Graves and was the 8th book in the series. It's the prequel to the Taylor Jackson series.
Did you make him more evil?
No. Nope.
Interesting. Did you change anything?
I changed some of it. I mean, it was, it was certainly a first novel. By the time I got back to it, it was definitely a first novel. And I was able to, just go back in and zhuzh the writing and make it a little more, sophisticated and complicated. But no, his motivation remains the same.
And no feedback, he wasn't bad enough, huh?
He wasn't bad enough the first time, and he was fine the second.
Isn't it interesting, though, how things happen in their time?
Very much so. And that's, if there are any writers that are, new writers, especially that are watching this, understand perseverance is all about it. What works one day is not going to work another day. What's right for one person isn't right for another. It's a very subjective industry. And just because you've gotten a no doesn't mean the answer is no. It just means it's not right for that particular person, but there's going to be somebody. You only need one yes. You only need one yes. You can get 1,000 no's if you get one yes.
Did you think when you were younger, like working in political offices and stuff, did you ever envision this life for yourself?
No. No. I mean, I thought I was going to go in the foreign service for a really long time. And, then grad school things shifted. Obviously I met a man and fell in love, and that was not the path that we were meant to take. And, everything has been very circuitous, but if we hadn't landed in Nashville and the series of events that hadn't happened that way, I don't know that I would have found my way back. But this is what I was meant to do. So I'm just grateful that I did find my way back to it.
Have you fallen right into the Nashville music scene and everything?
We're more punk rock and, romantic British bands. And yeah, we're
no, not at all.
Well, we have, but we're not the country music people.
Yeah.
We're going to, Third and Lindsay and the Exit Inn and, the different.
We're not embracing the like Grand Ole Opry and
we're not boot scoot boogie folks. No.
Okay, we've got some people in the chat, and I feel like I could ask you questions and we could chat all night. But part of the joy of book club is that people can ask questions too. So I will ask first, is there anyone in the online group that has a question for JT? And if so, you can just unmute yourself, maybe show your camera so she can see your beautiful face, and ask your question. Oh, we have a question in the chat. Brittany wants to know, are all the names symbolic for you like Perry Park was?
Not all of them, though. Olivia was Olivia from the moment I saw her on the beach. That name just leapt out. And sometimes I do change my main character names. And this one, I did not change a single name. I mean, it was Olivia, it was Darby, it was Scarlett, it was Park and Perry and Lindsay and Will Osley, who's a real person, actually.
Really?
Yes. He moved us during the pandemic, and he and his brother Mel are just big readers, loved our library, and because that's what they were moving.
I was going to say, did he love moving your library?
Oh, so many boxes of books. And he says, "Hey, I want to be a rock and roll cowboy detective in your next novel." I was like, all right. And so I put him in there. So he's a real guy. He actually came to one of the signings that I went to, which was really, really cool. But I mean, some of the names do, have symbolism to them, but mostly it was just, I rarely land on names that I don't change at some point. So these people were very clear in my head.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Brittany. Anybody else? Jimmy K usually has a question. I'm surprised she has not said anything yet. Oh, there she is.
Well, it's never quite a question, but JT, I loved the book. I was absolutely surprised it was Olivia. I did not see that coming. But a comment that you made tonight was about a professor and
Mhm.
creative writing and lacking encouraging words. Well, it was a previous author, Emily Henry from Bad Cree, had the very same experience, and she went on to write an award-winning book. So I think you got to get through the schools, and make sure that they're a little more encouraging. And then, so anyways, but no, I truly enjoyed the book.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I'm glad you were surprised. That's really fun.
Very much so. Thank you.
I think you're muted.
I thought I unmuted myself.
I saw your lips moving. I'm like, she's either reading
Oh.
something or.
No, this is, we're all new to Zoom, right?
Oh, yeah.
Any questions from the room? Carlos, do you have a question?
That's all the good questions.
Well, I literally ask questions for a living. So I'm going to turn this around so you can see him. Ooh.
Hi.
Oh,
Hello.
Stay.
I also enjoyed the book very much.
can you hear him? Hang on. Now try. Whoop.
Can you hear me now, Gigi?
Yeah. Yeah.
I also enjoyed the book very much, so thank you. Well, hold up. If you hear me. Is that a little better?
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you so much. That's much better.
Okay. Yeah, no, you can do that. Question. I was a little surprised and not surprised that Olivia had a child at the end, considering that she was, I wouldn't say the villain, but sort of the villain of the story. Did you, like when you created the character of Olivia, did you expect at the end that she would have a child? So
No.
then I guess, what's the motive, or how did you come to the decision to give her a child, I guess, right? So, thank you.
It happened in the epilogue as I was writing it. It came out of nowhere. I loved the idea of she loses everything, but she gains something too. I mean, yes, she did something bad, but she's not really a villain. I mean, she is, but she's not, but she is. And so that kind of, I don't know the right word for it. It's late here, but that she was able to get pregnant by Perry, but not by Park, was actually important because they are not identical twins. If they were identical twins, they would have had identical sperm. So when she did have Perry's child, I had to go back and make them fraternal twins instead of identical twins. So there was just this weird little science moment at the end. I was like, oh, shoot, she couldn't do that. If they had all the technical stuff, they have a RA mismatch is why they can't get pregnant. So I did change that at the last minute, but I loved that, she's cut off from everyone. She's lost everything. She's doing the show. She's got this child, but she doesn't have the people that she loves in her life, the people that she has grown up with. And that felt very sad to me and very poignant, So that's why I did it.
Any other questions from the room? This is like being a teacher. Nobody wants to talk.
I know. Wow.
I mean, they're just relying on me to ask all the questions is what's happening. I wanted to talk about her ability to have essentially get pregnant twice from Perry.
Mhm.
And because you're also in this, so you're talking about fertility, you're talking about abortion, you're talking about sperm donors. Like there's a lot going on there. I'm curious what kind of feedback you've got on this book. Like you said, a lot of people have felt seen, but have you had any, I don't want to say blowback, but we live in a world of blowback. Have you had any negative reactions to this book?
I saw one review that was like 90 pages long
No.
that really took me apart for her abortion and for her feeling as a grown woman that something that she had done as a child impacted her ability to have a child. And this woman completely took me apart, that was irrational and irresponsible and all of it. And I'm like, you know what, whatever. You know, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm entitled to write what I want to write. And, you know, it's all good. I'm sorry you hated the book. It is what it is. That's the only one I've seen. My copy editor did make mention of it, but she also was thinking in terms of 2022 instead of 1995 in Tennessee. Very different world, different laws, different everything back then. I mean, they weren't doing pills very often. It was all manual abortion. I mean, it's just, you know, so I kind of explained to her why that was there the way it was. And she was like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It's because our attitudes have changed towards it. The laws have changed dramatically. And it is something, you know, again, it's much more in the current conversation, but it's still something that most women don't talk about, you know?
Yeah. So you said you wrote a lot during the pandemic, this little thing called the pandemic. Do you have more books that are already done?
I am currently sitting on, you mentioned my pen name. I'm currently sitting on 2 finished Joss Walker novels, 2 finished Joss Walker stories. I've had 5 releases so far this year of short stories and novels. And I've got, so those 2 novels are coming out, the Joss Walkers, and I've got a short story coming out in September. It's a dark academia anthology in these hallowed halls. It's a British publisher. It looks really, really cool. So yeah, I mean, I lined up a lot of stuff for the pipeline. I think I have seven different properties releasing this year. I need to get my butt in gear so I can have stuff for next year. Everything's kind of front loaded in 2023, and I need to get going. I'll be done with the 2024 novel here in another couple of months.
How do you write? Do you schedule your time for it? I mean, obviously you're like Thriller Fest and touring books and stuff. So how do you structure your writing time?
So I try to be at my desk at 10. I try to have done all of the business stuff that's needed and everything. I start moving that number earlier and earlier, so I can get as much done before noon as possible. And then we usually have a driveway date. My husband and I will go sit in the driveway in the sun and chat about our day, and then we'll have a little lunch, and then I'll go back to it around 1:30 and write again for a couple hours. I shoot for 1,000 words a day. Sometimes I make that. Sometimes I don't make that. Sometimes I blow the curve and, you know, get 5,000 or 7,000. Yeah, it just depends. But I do try to write every day if I possibly can. I had a really hard time doing that while I was touring It's One of Us. So I actually took the entire tour off writing, and I still have hives. I really feel like I fell really far behind taking, you know, I was on tour for 3 weeks, and I was doing tour events for 3 weeks leading in. So I had about 6 weeks off, and it was good. I think it's always healthy to take a break. But I do feel like I fell a little bit behind, but I filled the pipeline. So, you know,
is writing cathartic for you? Is it like exercise? Like, is it something you have to do every day?
It is very cathartic. I mean, I work through a lot of emotions, and, you know, there's a lot going on in my head. Like I said, I'm a very visual writer. So I see scenes and I'm hearing dialogue, and I just need to write them down. I just need to write it all down. So even if I'm not like writing, chances are I've got my day one app open and I'm making notes about something, or, you know, it's a rare day that I don't touch the work in some way.
Did you always see things that way, like reading books and imagining things, and now are just putting them to paper, I say, but to screen, to whatever method you're writing in? Like we had Jeffrey Archer here in January, I think. He still writes by hand, like to paper, which is probably not my preferred method for writing anything. except to-do lists. But what do you dictate? Do you write? Do you go off of notes? Are you a sticky note person? What's your process?
Every book gets a notebook where I take notes. I'll put together a synopsis that goes in the front of the notebook. And I will, anything and everything either goes in the day one journal app that I type it in, or it goes in the notebook, or it goes in the book notes section of the Scrivener file once I finally open a Scrivener file for it. And so it's always hashtagged so I can find it very easily. Day one's really great. I've got years and years and years of journal stuff in there of ideas and stories, and everything's hashtagged so I can find it very easily. Sometimes just writing things out by hand is incredibly helpful to clarify, right? Because if you're on the laptop, your tendency is to want to write your way through issues. Whereas if you're sitting there with a notebook and a piece of paper, you're a little more deliberate about it. And so, if I ever get stuck, I'll write by hand. I'll write out scenes by hand, or take notes, or outline what I have. Sometimes when, if I'm stuck, I'll go outline what I have so I can see where I stand with stuff. But yeah, I've always been the super visual kid who, the stuffed animals were having their own lives and their own stories. And I get very attached to inanimate objects. And, I just had to buy a new car, and I wept walking away from my old car. I mean, I felt like I was abandoning him in this parking lot all by himself.
I like that it was a he.
Yeah, that car was actually he. His name was Bodhisattva. He was my little Buddhist Bodhi. I loved him. He still breaks my heart. He broke down and I had to sell him. I feel so bad. But my new car is named Ghost. She's white. It's a girl, and
She's
her name is
fast.
Ghost. She's very fast. Very fast. I like to drive, so it's kind of fun.
April says, when Peyton and Scarlett are revealed to be Park's children, I remember their mom saying that the photo of Scarlett's donor was a similar looking person to Peyton's donor. And I'd been thinking, was this all just a strange lab mix-up or something more, like Park had used a photo of Perry to donate again?
So it's not really spelled out, and it's not really a real thing, but she did get pregnant off the same sample. She just didn't realize she was pregnant. She messed up.
What?
And when they got the new sample, she was actually pregnant. The test just was negative, and she thought she had her period, but she actually didn't. And that's why Scarlett was born early. There's only been one person that caught that.
Oh.
Yeah. Scarlett was born 8 months.
That was interesting. Thanks for letting us know that. And I was kind of wondering if that was a strange question, if there was really no answer, but it was kind of like one of the things that was kind of bothering me, that how does that all work? How does that all come together? So thank you.
Right. Well, yeah, no, the company said, and they did send her a new sample, but she was pregnant. She was pregnant off of the original sample. The book was too long at that point. I was starting to get into the weeds with all, there are things that got cut. That was one of them.
Okay. Well, that's a helpful, that's like a little Easter egg that we didn't know
Yeah,
about.
it is totally an Easter egg.
Have you, as you've embraced your writing career and into the thriller world, have you embraced the dark and twisty more? Like, how bad are you going to go for your bad guys now? Like, because that's the thing with thrillers, is you can make them as awful as you can imagine them. So have you embraced the dark and twisty more, or do you just, they are who they are and it is what it is? Or do you push that envelope on purpose sometimes?
It's, it's really interesting you asked that, because the Taylor books are much darker than my standalones.
Mm-hmm.
The bad guys are badder. They are darker. They are much less nuanced than the later books. The later books, the killers are much more nuanced, or the villain is more nuanced. I got really freaked out about halfway through the Taylor series. I started having really bad nightmares. And actually, if you see this stone, it's a citrine. The Immortals is the 5th book in the Taylor series, and it dealt with Wicca. And as it turns out, I was surrounded by soul practitioner Dianic witches. I just didn't know it. And one of them was my hairdresser, who introduced me to the head of the Nashville Coven, who asked me to speak at the Pagan Unity Festival, where I met an oracle who told me that I was inviting evil in, and that's why I was having the nightmares, and that I needed a citrine to keep the evil at bay. And I have not taken it off since. And it's really, really helped with the nightmares. So the earlier books were really
That is such a wild story.
I know. It's kind of crazy. But yeah, I met an oracle. She was a 6th generation oracle. And I mean, I was just talking about, I have nightmares, and her hand went up and she said, I am a 6th generation oracle. You need a citrine. You have evil around you. You've been inviting it in, and you need to banish it. And I'm like, yes, please. Thank you. That would be
Banish
great.
it, please. I'm good. I'm over this.
Please, there's a lot of sage at my house now.
What does your husband think of it?
I have been known to have a situation where my husband will come up and say, you need to get the sage out. You need to sage us. You need to sage the house. Yeah.
So you've got him believing in it too.
Totally. We bought in 100%. It was really interesting though, because citrines also bring abundance. And it was really that kind of moment when my career took a shift and moved to the next level. So, was it manifest destiny, or was it just a fluke? Who knows?
But you're not taking it off.
I'm not taking it off. I wore it on a string forever. I finally got a necklace for it.
I love it. Are there any more questions? Okay, my last question for you. Technically, there's 2. I have one last question, and then I always ask about books. But for anybody who's listening, whether it's now or on the replay, that has a great idea for a thriller, because I know that thrillers are very difficult to write without, telegraphing what's going to happen. What's the best piece of advice you have, or the best thing that you've learned about writing these books that you wish you would have known with your first one?
So I was actually halfway through my first one when I got the best bit of advice that I had ever gotten by a guy you probably have heard of, Stuart Woods. He's recently passed away. Stuart had a whole thing in the back of his book that said, do not reach out to me. I will not answer. And me, being the contrarian that I am, saw that and said, I'm going to reach out to him. And I did. And he answered. He was parked on some boat somewhere, and he wrote me back. I had asked him if it was all right for a main character in a series to not be in the first chapters, and that I had a new character coming in at like chapter 13 or 14. And was that allowable? And he wrote back and said, their only rules are those you create page by page. Having come out of a creative writing program, that was not the advice I was getting. I was being told that, I write too much like B-grade detective fiction. Being told that there are no rules, it was just like, and yeah, it was total freedom. And I abandoned all the stuff that I had been told and really dug into that. And that, if I can give that advice to anybody, it is fantastic. You make the rules. You can do whatever you want.
And my final question, best 3 books you've read lately that you would recommend? We're in summer reading season, so
So Claire McIntosh, The Last Guest, I just finished that. Liv Constantine, The Senator's Wife, really
her
great.
books are so good.
And then I got to go with a fantasy, because I'm on the 4th book, and I've literally like put it down and I won't touch it, because when it ends, it's the end of the series, and I will mourn forever that I don't get to. So I'm holding back, and it's Sabaa Tahir's An Ember in the Flame series. It's remarkable world building, absolutely remarkable.
Ooh, I will add some of those to my to be read list. Thank you so much for your time and for the books, the multitude of them that you are releasing this year. And we will definitely be watching and reading, and just appreciate your time and your work, and have fun at Thriller Fest.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.